Good day, folks. Bob from BBD, Afghanistan again. Lots of stuff happening there, right? Everything's in a flux. Nobody knows who's won. Nobody knows who's lost. The latest out of there: deadly firefight at Kabul airport as US boosts airlift. Okay. The other one that coming out yesterday was reported: Afghanistan faces economic shock as sanctions replace aid. No recognition of Taliban. No talk, says the European Union. Just let me say this, folks. No matter how many people exult about Russia, the new RICS, as the pricks, Pakistan, Russia, Iran, and China, they just don't have the global muscle to pull Afghanistan out of a morass. No matter how much we think about it. Just remember, we stayed in this morasses for years, 71 on till the day the nuclear deal with the United States was done. Because whether you like it or not, the United States nuclear deal is what pulled us into the global top layer. Okay. Then what do you have? Taliban name acting head of central bank following economic turmoil. Now this guy has no experience, no financial experience. All he's been handling is their accounts, which essentially have to do with drugs. And he's now the he's now the central bank. Okay. Taliban block government staff from returning to work. This is one of the big mistakes they are making. Then you have China hints it may provide financial aid to Afghanistan, but everybody knows. And a lawmaker suggests Pak intel behind Taliban takeover. Absolutely. Hints provide financial aid. Everybody, including Afghanistan, knows what that comes tied with, right? It's their copper mines, it's their rare earth possibility. But what is happening here, right? Up security. China to Pakistan after attacks on nationals. China condemns attack on its nationals in Pakistan. Not hunky-dory at all. As China-Pakistan way recognizing Taliban, experts warn of long-term losses and US ire. China asks Pakistan to arrest those behind suicide bombs. I would too, right? Biden mulls staying beyond August 31st. Taliban issues threat. And look at the kind of language they use, right? Taliban warns West, exit by August 31st or else. US races against deadline to rescue Americans and allies in Afghanistan. Now this is an ideal time to try and or else. The United States also should send a message. Taliban ban co-education in Herat. Woman set on fire for bad cooking. Unbelievable. US move left terror groups cheering. Ruse former UK PM says PM Tony Blair. Let me just tell you folks. The British are the most complicit and the oldest players in this great game. And they haven't been able to redeem themselves because they continue to view everything through Pakistan Army's lenses. Change. More later. So we have this recrimination that continues, miscue after miscue, the unraveling of Biden's plan for orderly withdrawal. Let me just say this. It could probably never have been orderly, right? Because every time they would have been attempted, the cards would have been out of their pocket, and Pakistan would have countered them. Taliban co-founder Baradar in Kabul to hammer out government. The government is still a distant dream. US warns of security threat from IS near Kabul airport. Well, part of it says there is IS, part of it says there's no IS. Anti-Taliban force says they have taken 3 districts in Afghanistan's north. Talib Karzai talks inconclusive. Qureshi in Kabul, just like I said, it's a dream too far, right? It's still a stretch. Qureshi visit assumes significance at a time when Pakistan is willing to play its part in forming a new government in Afghanistan. Interestingly, Taliban on Sunday offered amnesty to former President and Vice President Ashraf Ghani and Amarullah Saleh, respectively. In an exclusive interview with Pakistan's Geo News, senior Taliban leader Khalilur Rahman Hakimi said, "There is no enmity between us." Go figure that. You've massacred and killed so many Afghans. And you're now saying there's no enmity. Who's going to believe that? I hope not the world. He says, and as Pranab Dal Samta writes, it's not done till it's done. Many emirs of Afghanistan. Taliban 2.0 is a coalition being pulled from both within and without. He says, now Taliban itself is an amalgamation of a spiritual leadership under Hibatullah Akazumunda, who has preferred to stay low-key despite being supreme commander, and Haqqani group that controls the military muscle, and a political leadership under Abdul Ghani Baradar, who till now, was in the ISI jail, who has been projected as the face of the new Taliban. There is still no clarity on the nature of influence Baradar may hold over military commission, just as there's no visibility on Akhundzada's role, right? Here's the thing. Where is this extremism going to come out? Russia may not have all those compulsions, but it cannot perpetually turn a blind eye to fleeing Afghans, building pressure on Tajikistan and Uzbekistan's borders, right? Everybody is in the game. In sum, the Taliban face the challenge to balance many contradictions to attain legitimacy and recognition between Islamic radicalism and Afghan nationalism, between nationalism and nation building, between Pakistan and Qatar, between Pakistan, China, Russia, which is now becoming BRIC, right? Pakistan, Russia, Iran and China, and the US. That is just on the outside. Policy time bomb ticking inside. He said, within its fold, there's the Pakistan deep state, its various factions, and the religious leadership, which it presumably remains committed to its extreme interpretation of Islam, but has chosen silence for now. When will these snakes come out of their bill to sting Pakistan and China? Which they obviously will. India will get a blowback, no doubt. But China and Pakistan also better be ready for it, as should Russia, in a sense, in Chechnya. Cheers. So the other bit player, why call a bit player Russia? Why do I call Russia a bit player? Because it has the least to gain. Its basic objective was to humiliate and take a badla, revenge on the United States for what the United States has done. So it's really got nothing much to gain, but a hell of a lot to lose, right? But it's still a player. As you go, deputy NSA in Moscow to step up coordination in Afghan theater. Okay, but Putin's kind of worried, right? He's a white supremacist himself, right? Putin says don't want militants disguised as Afghanistan refugees in Russia. He's not accepting any refugees, right? The push to this continues to maintain some kind of a hold on Indian defense deals. No delay. S-400 to arrive by December. Let's see how this plays out with the United States, because in this whole theater, what's important really is the relationship between India and the United States. And I don't want this to really be a test case of trust, and that's exactly, Indians are so thin-skinned, everything then becomes an issue of trust and less trust and more trust, right? What do we have here? Putin's presence in UN debate on maritime security underlines India's strategic autonomy. Not only does it underline India's strategic autonomy, it's more important for Russia, because what Russia is trying to say is that it also has a strategic autonomy from China. It says President Putin, who has almost never participated in such UNSC events, has made a remarkable gesture in being personally present. It is undoubtedly a personal gesture to PM Modi, underlining the good political equation and confluence of interest to a certain degree. At a minimum, one can conclude that in evaluating Russia's ties with China and with India, Putin, in a stubble form of dehyphenation, is preserving Russia's strategic autonomy. I think that was more what it was all about. But India was showing its own strategic autonomy to Russia. Signal to Moscow. Jaishankar on first trip to Georgia after visiting Russia. So India is also making a point, right? But in a SCO headed by Russia, India proposes plan against Pak terror groups openly, right? Pakistan NSA listening, India proposes action against LET Jaish within SCO framework. Important point. India mounts pressure on Pakistan at HCO with plan on LET JEM, implement UN resolution on terrorists. This is while Russia is listening, China is listening, and of course Pakistan. Pakistan PM's aid, but Pakistan is now trying to cover its bets as far as, burnt its bridges with the Middle East. It's trying to never being able to recognize Israel. What do we have here? Pak PM's aid made secret visit to Israel last year, says report. It's becoming important. Israel is becoming important to them, right? 1971, when Delhi and Moscow came together. Well, this goes on in a bum chum kind of Russian bye-bye thing. But the points I want to note from what this Nandan Unikrishnan writes, he says, but the more things change, the more others stay the same. India is still concerned with China, this time with its belligerent rise. In response, India is moving closer to the US. However, Russia is moving closer to China, trying to counter a belligerent US. This undoubtedly introduces significant tensions in the Indo-Russian relationship, but neither India nor Russia wants to be a junior partner to any other power. Well, India, I don't know why they keep saying doesn't want to be. We are a junior partner to the United States. Till our economy gets up and boom, 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 we are going to continue being a junior partner. No need pretending otherwise. Russia, on the other hand, when they talk about junior partner, they definitely do not want to be a junior partner to China, folks. And there lies the crack for India. Cheers, more later. So folks, in conclusion, a little bit of readouts. You have one by Pranab Dhal Samta, Thaw, the Cold War, and Sir. He brings out a lot of history about what happened, and the Cold War is how this whole thing started. But I think it went way before that with the British. But you know, the Pakistani were in this Mujahid game even before, even people don't remember, in the 50s, right? What is it? Beijing calling Kabul. If Afghanistan was dominated by the Soviets in the 80s, the Americans in the 2000s, why should China not seek to make 2020 the Chinese decade? With Pakistan in tow and CPEC, BRI initiative network in play, China has much bigger plans in Afghanistan, which begins by filling the vacuum being left by the US. And let's not forget the pressure China can bring on Russia. Okay? Well, that's the way he looks at it. In sum, the Afghanistan political context is changing for Biden faster than anyone could have anticipated. Again, quite similar to the 80s, so consumed was the US by its victory over the Soviets that it failed to recognize the real enemy in radical Islamic terror. A repeat would be both disastrous and tragic, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Now here, I'm going to talk about this Avinash Mohani. He says Afghan lessons for India can't keep using US crutches ad infinitum, which is true. But this is what I find really amazing. Now, badly mauled in Afghanistan, it will be a miracle if the American empire survives in its present form. Is this Mohani fellow for real? Empire? America? Empire? There's a huge difference between empire, folks, and world order. A US world order, which was driven by Bretton Woods and the financial systems and the whole thing, right? And maybe, but they talk about... So continuing with Mohani says, obviously his and Pratap Bhanu Mehta's personal prejudices and personal biases come into play because, I mean, one has a socialist bent of mind, the other one obviously was the time of the USSR, right? He says, at the same time, China, Russia, and Pakistan are trying to create a false narrative of reform Taliban to justify their engagement with the group. Okay. Then he says, more than India, Pakistan should be wary of the Taliban takeover. On the ground, there is no difference between Afghan Taliban and Tehrik-e-Taliban. Bang on, Pakistan, well, Mohani. In any case, in India's security establishment, a realization must sink in that it can't keep using the US crutches ad infinitum and be identified with a sinking. It's not a case of identified with a sinking empire. This is the message they keep trying to send. Sinking empire, the largest economy in the world, the fastest growing economy of the world, the leader in the global in technology, and he calls that a sinking empire. Sinking empire was the British. Where is he, man? He's born in the wrong era. And what does Pratap Bhanu Mehta write? The sins of again an empire. American empire has been stuck in a place where, to use Polybius's word, it can neither endure its condition nor the means to overcome it. People are just, these biases are just amazing. There is a long litany of losses. The wars in Iraq, Libya, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Somalia, Lebanon, the coups from Iran to Chile. Well, coups of Iran to Chile are something different, right? And these are not wars. America was not at war in Libya or in Iraq. It was essentially, in Iraq it actually technically won, right? At the heart of the empire is the debasement of moral identity. Empire has 7 deadly sins. The first is corruption. So, well, if the first deadly sin is corruption, as he says, once the empire leaves, it obviously is in India's DNA. Mughal Empire, before that some other empire. We've been empire rolled over in millennium, in years. So we are like corrupt as ever, right? What is the second one? The second sin is self-deception. Okay, well, that's interesting. The third is the morality that, to use Tagore's phrase, is split down the middle, committed to the very things it disavows. What does the rule of law mean when empire itself enacts a regular lawlessness? I kind of find it strange. Okay, the fourth sin is its continued expansionism. The omniscience of empire is apt to give every local conflict global significance. What's going to happen with China? I wonder. The fifth is hypocrisy. The more power tries to stretch, the more it deploys double standards. The sixth is a cult of violence. Okay, and there was a cult of violence in Pakistan. There's no empire, right? Pakistan to the drug wars, the abiding legacy of this empire is saturation of societies with arms and militias. To blame that, I think on the US would be a bit much, I'd say. The seventh is a sin is racism. Even the most liberal-minded empire will create a hierarchy of those whose lives matter. Even in the emancipatory mission, it cannot get away from reinforcing claims of superiority and gender. So I wonder, where our racism comes in, Mr. Pratap Bhanu? Where does the caste system racism come in? I just don't understand it. Like, was it a Vedic empire? Wow. His logic really defies. He's an intelligent guy, though. The Taliban's victory is not just a moral booster for fundamentalists everywhere. The US management of the withdrawal will give fillip to fundamentalism's deepest psychological impulses. It is an anarchic word, each to their own. Absolutely each to their own, especially India. But let's stop calling the US an evil empire. It's a sell by it. It never was an empire to start with, folks. If you really look at the Webster dictionary and the definitions of an empire. World order, maybe. Empire, definitely. Alright, that's my take. Anyway. Cheers. Jai Hind.